Hi, Rob here. This episode of Modern Technology Watches was recorded well before the events of January 6, 2021 in Washington, D.C., and was originally scheduled for release sometime in the second week of January. As the film discussed in this episode features famous scenes of municipal facilities being overrun by a crowd of rioters who have been whipped into a frenzy by an agitator over class-based divides, we thought it best to delay this episode's release. Please know that we acknowledge the unfortunate coincidence. I briefly considered scrapping this episode and redoing it with some other film, but in the end thought the film's unique place in history, and perhaps a renewed sense of relevance about it, merited keeping our discussions of it available. We sincerely apologize in advance for anything in this episode which might be misconstrued as insensitivity on our parts regarding the real events, which had not happened yet when we recorded. And we wish to stress that whatever we say about the fictitious events portrayed in this movie, we believe the real January 6th insurgency was the work of thoughtless and crazy people engaged in evil. We have taken away a renewed consideration of how fiction such as this movie can more deeply enable us to process things when similar events happen to us in real life. We invite continued discussion on the matter among ourselves, our listeners, and everyone out there. Thanks for listening. Now, on with the episode. Hello.
Hello.
I am Rob Vincent.
I am Gila Drazen.
And you are listening to Modern Technology Watches, episode 211?
211.
Episode 211.
211 of Modern Technology Watches, getting ever closer to the end of the second season.
Yes, for which I'm sure it will be a very special episode in one way or another. But, you know, this is just a regular ass episode with our regular asses, and we are a married couple of film geeks who have a podcast in which we show each other films we love that the other hasn't seen from our combined library. And
occasionally from outside our combined library, but mostly from in.
And we dissect the results.
Yes, we certainly do.
And Gila.
Yes, Rob.
We should be releasing this sometime around the new year. So this is kind of a New Year's episode. Maybe?
Sure-ish. I have no idea what we're going to be watching. It could be a New Year's episode.
That's because it's my turn to choose.
Well, yes, it is.
And so I think I'm going to get up and retrieve a disc-type thing from our shelves.
Okay. So I will sit here and try to remember what we were watching a year ago. We watched Blade Runner in November. Yikes. I think we watched Network in January. Okay, I'm not remembering, but was it camp? Was camp in the middle? I don't even remember. Huh. Okay.
Camp is just a flashing memory.
Another word for nothing left to lose.
Get
all
these
right.
ear things back on my ear
back
things.
And you got the ear things back on your ear things?
I do.
Okay. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm glad you're here.
Now, I came back with this.
Okay.
I have handed you a blurry disc.
You have handed me a blurry disc of the complete Metropolis, Fritz Lang's sci-fi masterpiece with 25 minutes of restored footage.
And your face is already doing a thing. Now I know you've been hurt by an expanded, restored version of a movie before, but this is not Blade Runner.
It's not Blade Runner. It's not Empire Records either.
It's not Empire Records.
That did not do good things for me. Okay. For the first time, Lang's vision, which has influenced contemporary films like Blade Runner and Star Wars, seems complete. Now, you know,
yes,
better than most, that the way to my heart,
yes,
is not Blade Runner and Star Wars.
No, it is not.
All right, here's what the back copy says. Incorporating more than 25 minutes of newly discovered footage, the 2010 restoration of Metropolis is the definitive edition of Fritz Lang's science fiction masterpiece. Backed by a new recording of Gottfried Huppert's We was never Nazis. We was Nazis. Backed by a new recording of Gottfried Huppertz's 1927 score, presented here in DTS HD Master Audio 5.1. The film's dazzling visual design and special effects are more striking than ever. And the integration of scenes and subplots long considered lost endows Metropolis with even greater tension and emotional resonance as it dramatizes the conflict between wealthy uber-capitalists and rebellious subterranean laborers, orchestrated by a diabolical scientist capable of destroying them both.
Yeah, so, something light.
Light,
and,
yes. Because you know what is totally, escapist fare right now?
Mm-hmm.
Uber-capitalists.
Uber-capitalism,
Uber-capitalism, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is long.
It is long.
I mean, it was long before.
Yes, it was long, but chunks of it were lost to time for the longest time.
So it used to be 123 minutes long, and now it's 148 minutes long.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, this is a long one.
Yeah, und it has subtitles.
Jawohl.
Does have subtitles, or?
It has intertitles, actually.
Ooh.
For this is a silent movie. And the difference between subtitles, which are on the screen as the action is going on, and intertitles, which are the cards that pause the action while they show you what the characters are saying.
Yes.
Yes.
I know about intertitles from Singing in the Rain.
Yes. So this is not one of those newfangled talkies. This is a silent movie. And because chunks of it were lost for so long, and because it was in the public domain for so long, a bunch of different people did a bunch of different things with it. But this is sort of the official, restored, as much as possible version, cleaned up and everything. And it should be, I think, a good watch.
I trust you.
I appreciate that.
I'm willing to try anything once at your suggestion. Now, one of the special features on here is an interview with Paula Felix Didier, the curator of Museo del Cine in Buenos Aires, where the missing footage was discovered. I'm not going to say anything about old Nazis hiding in Argentina.
I will say that a couple of things we've watched recently inspired this choice. Because we recently watched The Producers, the Mel Brooks version, the original Mel Brooks film of The Producers.
The 1968 Producers.
With Zero Mostel.
Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder.
And a bunch of dancing Nazis. And we also watched the Doctor Who story Vengeance on Varos.
Oh, we certainly did.
Yesterday, which I think you were a little nonplussed with, but it was an 80s BBC TV wobbly set attempt at doing a bit of criticism of the uber capitalists and what they can do when their power goes unchecked. And rest in peace, Philip Martin. But
did they have to dress up the guy like a poop? The villain in this particular Doctor Who story was functionally a poop emoji.
He really was. He was supposed to be a lizard, and in the execution, he ended up more looking like a brown, shiny poop. And on that character's future appearances, he was tinted more green than brown to get him back around to lizard looking instead of, turd.
I'm glad he had enough fiber in his diet to go from brown to green.
Maybe it's a seasonal thing, how much sun he was getting for his chlorophyll.
Very also possible. But yeah, wow.
Anyway.
This
is a movie I think is interesting. I think it will be interesting to hear what you say about it. I look forward to hearing how this hits you. Well, and if you hit me in response.
So, okay. The 2010 restoration of 1927's Metropolis. Jawohl.
Hey, Gila.
Hey, Rob.
Are we back?
Do in fact, think that we're back.
We are back from Metropolis.
Boy, howdy, are we back from Metropolis.
We have just finished Metropolis.
Oh, well, I've got a question.
You have a question?
Yes, I do. I know this is something you're very fond of.
Mm-hmm.
How did you meet this movie, and how did it become so formative for you?
Well, as I was growing up, when I was a kid, there was the, I guess you could call it the It's a Wonderful Life effect, because this movie was in the public domain, or was considered in the public domain in the United States for a long time. And like It's a Wonderful Life, because of how screwed the intellectual property laws are in this country, people with money were able to get it declared no longer public domain. But for the longest time, it was a movie that you could get very cheaply on VHS. It was on television a lot. Public TV used to show it a lot. Channel 13, 21 here in New York. It was just one of those things. And the version shown back then, for the longest time, the surviving chunk of this movie was about 90 minutes long.
The version we watched was emphatically not 90 minutes long.
Right. And this film has been through so many versions, and because when it premiered, one of the criticisms of it, and it kind of went over like a wet fart.
What a charming turn of phrase, dear.
Yes. It was not successful during its opening. One of the complaints was that it was too freaking long. So it went through a lot of cuts just within Germany. And then when it was exported to other places, like Hollywood just cut the hell out of this movie to make it something you could show in America at the time. And this was pre-code even. The effect of it being cut for length and then cut for censorship and then further cut to fit into TV slots and whatnot, only after the fact did it become like a celebrated classic of modern cinema. So then the search was on to try and find some of the chunks, because like some cuts of the movie made no damn sense. Like people just couldn't figure out what the hell was going on because of how much had been cut. And yeah, it was kind of a holy grail for this much of the movie to exist now. I think there's still something like 5% of it missing. 2 major scenes, I think. 2 or 3 major scenes.
Well, were they missing, or were they just like they couldn't restore them to a point where they were usable?
Well, pretty much everything that you could that they got hold of is in the version we watched, which is the complete Metropolis, the authorized Blu-ray edition that's available now. You asked me how I got introduced to this movie, and it was on television a lot when I was a kid. I had seen it on television probably more times than I can count as a kid. Later in the VHS era, I had it on VHS, had it on DVD, had a couple of versions of it, including the Marauder version, which we will get into. But that's a trip in itself. And I want to get that disc because that's out on disc now too.
I'm sorry, when you say Marauder version, you mean Giorgio Moroder?
Yes, I do.
Oh my God, we have got to figure. I have so many questions.
Well, we will get to that. But so I figure we're probably best off discussing this film like we normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe after that, I can go into some of the other versions and things that have been done with it.
Okay.
So.
Yes.
Before we get into the cast, just in broad strokes, and this movie is all about the broad strokes.
It certainly is.
What did you think?
Well, right before we started watching, you asked me what my experience was with watching silent films. And I said, look, my greatest silent film experience has been watching The Royal Rascal, which is the silent movie that premieres at the beginning of Singin' in the Rain.
Mm-hmm.
Silent movie is not really my jam. For someone who talks as much as I'm sure this shocks you. So, it was kind of a slog for me.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. Part of it was because silent movie. Part of it was because when you see something like this that has been so foundational in so many ways to the culture as we know it.
Right.
Oh, you're like, oh, this is this, this is this, this is that. And I said, oh, this music, this is Pinky and the Brain. And you said, Pinky and the Brain sounds like this. This doesn't sound like Pinky and the Brain.
Yeah, big difference.
My mother used to say the same thing when like camp friends of mine or friends of mine from college or whatever would meet her. you look like Gila. No, Gila looks like me. I had this face first.
Yes.
And similarly, you can see and hear how this movie has had such an impact on everything that came after it.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's all of that.
Right.
With that said, as a Jewish person, this has a lot of baggage for me that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And to see this movie that came out of Germany in 1927, when when I was reading the back of the DVD case and it said that all the lost footage had been found in Argentina, which is where all the old Nazis went to hide. I was like, of course they found it in Argentina. And similarly, there was a whole set piece that I'm sure we'll talk about later that had a lot of really significant Holocaust resonance for me.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie was made in 1927.
Mm-hmm.
None of that had happened yet.
Right.
But it is very hard to look at. I keep saying it. I don't want to watch it with eyes of the current moment, but it's the current moment and I have eyes.
Right. Yeah, we've often come up against this.
Absolutely. And it's hard to watch something in your current moment and not view it in your current moment.
Of course.
This was hard for me. It was harder than I had anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting, and I look forward to the greater discussion.
So there are a couple of different aspects that this movie can be and is judged on.
Mm-hmm.
There are the implications, watching it as somebody with modern eyes, of watching this German expressionist film from the 1920s, knowing what was to come in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect that is, I think, most celebrated about this movie by movie dorks, such as myself, and I'm sure some of our listeners, is just the visuals of it.
Which were incredible.
Yeah.
Even now, it's the layers of detail, the amount of obvious design and care that went into the whole thing. Rather incredible. The amount of world building and production design, almost in the same way as like when we talked about Blade Runner. What they do to build that world, brilliantly done. It is aesthetically lovely. You can see, and separating those pieces of it from like the mechanics of making a movie in 1927, and you can see where the edits were.
Yeah.
It's jumpy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But the production design, gorgeous.
Yeah. Nobody was doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Like 1927, just, I keep thinking of like where the world was in 1927 and the people watching this. Like, a great many people in this movie were born in the 1800s. Like 1927, there were elderly, like veterans of the Civil War walking around. That it was just like, it seems now like so long ago, and yet they were doing stuff like this, which, like, there are effects in this movie that film experts are still arguing with each other how they might have been pulled off. The processes used to make this, like, now you make a movie and you know what blue screening is or green screening, you know what CGI is, you know what, miniatures and model shots and stuff are. And so much of it, like, just was not things that were used and they had to be come up with for this film. Also, this was a fucking expensive film. Like, it took like 17 months to make. The budget, I think, tripled during the production. Like, one producer was fired. It was just like such a huge undertaking. The thing that always blows me away is the crowd shots. Like, even for like just brief little shots, like the Tower of Babel sequence, and there are crowds there, and just you have literally hundreds of people in a shot. This was not no union shop. And no, I don't think anyone in those crowds got rich off of what they got paid to be in this film. But just the sheer scale of this production, like, you can't do that now.
Mm-mm.
Nobody would let anybody do that now, especially like they were throwing children around. Like, it was.
I mean, again, it's one of those things that you can't not look at in the eyes of the current moment.
Yes.
You couldn't put that many people together right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible.
Yeah.
But the other thing that really struck me was the utter synchronicity of movement. It was so well done.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you had those like platoons of people who were just walking in perfect step, so many of them.
Yeah.
It was brilliantly done. And there was a moment near the end of the movie. So it's approaching pyramid of people and you just see it expand. And there was a part where the intertitle was also set up like a pyramid. And I recognized that that was not in the original film because that's an English intertitle.
Right. But I think when they translated the intertitles, they did the same effects with them that were on the original. Like the way they were animated, which is not something you saw a lot.
That was also fascinating. So looking at just the artistic parts of this movie, totally there. The story, the acting choices.
Yeah.
I have a lot to say. I'm sure you're shocked.
The whole aesthetic of it, too, because it's retrofuturism. It's what they were doing to be futuristic back in 1927. So you've got like these suspended streets that all these cars are going around, and you've got these buildings with all the lights and everything. But like you've got planes going past that are biplanes. I love looking at retrofuturistic stuff with modern eyes, you know, seeing where they got it right, where they got it wrong.
Yeah.
You know, what anyone now would make a computer in Frederson's office was strands of like ticker tape with numbers going up and down the wall. So shall we get into the cast of this particular picture?
Sure. I'm curious what this discussion is going to be like.
Well, another thing, I think one thing I'll do is throw a couple of other names in here that are not cast, but let's talk about Fritz Lang, the director.
Yeah.
And Thea von Harbo, his wife at the time, who wrote the original novel on which this was based. They were a husband and wife creative team, basically.
Who does that?
Fritz Lang, he was from Austria, moved to Germany, met von Harbo, and made this movie. One person who liked his movie was Goebbels, from the Nazi Party, which was rising to power.
Send for Goebbels.
Yes. Now, he was of Jewish heritage.
Okay.
His mother had converted to Catholicism.
Okay.
And he was not raised Jewish, but he was identified under the Nuremberg laws as a part Jew. Now, he made a movie that the Nazis didn't like, and according to Lang, this from the Fritz Lang Wikipedia article, according to Lang, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels called Lang to his offices to inform him apologetically that the Testament of Dr. Mabuse was being banned, but nevertheless, he was so impressed by Lang's abilities as a filmmaker, especially Metropolis, that he offered Lang the position of head of German film studio UFA. Lang says it was during that meeting that he had decided to leave for Paris, but that the banks had been closed by the time the meeting was over. Lang claimed that after selling his wife's jewelry, he fled by train to Paris that very evening, leaving most of his money and personal possessions behind. However, his passport of the time showed that he traveled to and from Germany a few times during 1933. Lang left Berlin for good on July 31st, 1933, 4 months after his meeting with Goebbels and his initial departure. He moved to Paris and divorced Thea von Harbo, who stayed behind late in 1933. He didn't like the Nazis. She was fine with them.
I can understand that being a problem in a marriage.
Yes. So he noped out of there, moved to the United States, and continued to make movies here. She hung out there and kept making movies for Germany.
Oh. I was going to ask if she survived the 40s.
But anyway, I knew that was something you'd be curious about.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, yes, there are definitely political messages in this film that the powers that be at the time may have found ways to latch onto.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go forward to the cast here.
Okay.
Let's just go ahead and start with Brigitte Helm as Maria.
Okay,
She played Maria. She played Evil Maria. She also played the Machine Man, Das Maschinenmensch, which in the German is machine person, but in the English translations, it's always translated as machine man, even though it's very curvy with boobs.
That is all true.
Robo boobs.
The choice that she made to differentiate physically between Maria and Marie Android Net, as I was referring to her.
Yes.
Involved sort of making her hands into claws and squinting one eye.
Mm-hmm.
Robots squint.
Yeah.
That's how you can tell that they're robots, is they squint. I'm willing to suggest that the eyeliner wasn't her choice. But that's the other thing. Marie Android Net was wearing a lot of eyeliner. Like a lot of eyeliner.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because when he like transposed her face onto the robot, she wasn't wearing any makeup. So I don't know where the makeup came from. Unless we're supposed to assume that Hell wore a lot of makeup.
Well, it's expressionism. And also it's silent movie acting, which if you haven't watched a lot of it, it's a lot.
It was certainly a lot.
It's basically, you know, every single actor is a mime. And having done a bit of recreational miming myself, and professional, I got given money for it sometimes.
Absolutely, but recreational
when I used to be a
miming
street
is
performer,
just it's a great phrase.
Yeah. Talking of choices, like, especially in this era, the director's word was law. So, like, if the director wants you to do something, you do it. You know, I don't think there was much back and forth between the cast and the director, but that's just totally my assumption. This movie was not fun for anybody to make. Like, the days were long. The production was, like, torturous, basically. There was a scene where Frater, like, falls to his knees in front of Maria, and apparently Lang spent an entire day just taking and retaking that scene to the point where, like, the actor couldn't stand Maria when evil Maria was being burned at the stake. Like, she was really close to the actual fire, and, like, part of her costume caught fire. This was not OSHA approved by any sense. So, like, in addition to just how broad acting was on screen without sound, it's a whole different style of thing to take in. And so I told you, you know, let me know when you want to take breaks. Let me know if you want to just nope out of this whole thing, and we'll choose something else for the episode. Because, like, it is a lot. In the context of all this, if all the other comparison you've got is the rest of the people in this film, do you think she did all right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the fact that she was able to delineate those separate performances without saying anything audible, very impressive. And I say this as having played multiple characters in the same production, as I know you have as well.
Okay, so Brigitte Helm, or Brigitte, or however it was. I'm going to, like, by and large, I think, say these names in English, or as an English speaker would, because I normally try and be a reasonable amount of respective to the original languages of these sorts of things, and talk about, like, Nicaragua, but
and the contras,
but
the Sandinistas.
But yes, I'm only going to screw this up and sound like an idiot if I try to do all these names in German, because my German is approximately garbage.
As is mine, for the record.
So Brigitte Helm, she also fled before the war. She fled in the 1930s because she saw the Nazis taking over the film industry over there and was not into that.
Where'd she go?
I think she went to France. Let's see. Yeah. Helm incurred the wrath of Nazi Germany for race defilement in marrying her second husband, Dr. Hugo Kuhnheim, an industrialist of Jewish background. So she married a Jew.
Who does that?
Yeah. And she retired from films, this from her own Wikipedia article, because she was disgusted with the Nazi takeover of the film industry. In 1935, she moved to Switzerland, where she later had 4 children with Kuhnheim. In her later years, she refused to grant any interviews concerning her film career. So she noped out of there. Let's go up to Heinrich George as Grot, Guardian of the Heart Machine. That would be Beard Guy.
Beard Guy.
Yes.
So I thought he was dead.
Well, I mean, he is now. But...
Well, yes, but I at one point thought the character had been killed, and he wasn't. But I said, is that crumply thing the Beard Guy? And you said, well, it's a crumply thing. And I was like, sorry I asked.
Yeah, I think you were looking at a bit of the set.
It's very possible, but I saw something that was approximately the color of the clothes that all the worker people were wearing by some of the stairs.
So you're saying among all the gray and dark gray and black stuff, it was like dark gray.
Yeah, but it was on the floor where none of the people were. I don't know, maybe it's like the hanging munchkin. I don't know.
So what did you think of his performance or his character?
I felt bad. I felt bad for him. Initially, I felt bad for him.
Mm-hmm.
Then when he incited the people to riot, no, fuck him.
Yeah.
And I think that was really an interesting message that was in the movie. It was a lot about what the group can be talked into doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if people harness that power for ill, obviously bad things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like really right there at the forefront of it.
Yeah.
Took this group that had been whipped up by someone else and whipped them further.
Mm-hmm.
The character was very interesting. And he was like, you're idiots. You're all going to die. And then after he woke up from having been beat, I'm assuming, he was like, ah!
Yeah.
Murder!
Mm-hmm.
And again, he did fine. Yeah.
He did this thing where he kept putting his hands down in the front waistband of his pants.
Yeah. So at like the very end, when the guy went to shake his hand, I was like, that hand has just been on balls. Why do you want to touch it? One of my teachers in high school would often put his hands in the back waistband of his pants.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly can't decide which is worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I had sometimes done that with like my rear pockets, but not in my pants. But again, like a lot of the gesturing and just the movements and the way people moved around and communicated in this movie, it's like it's impossible to know now how much of that was just how people would move around and do stuff in real life at the time, how much of it was them being European, and how much of it was just acting on screen in the pre-sound era.
Right. I mean, some of it reminds me of part of the conversation we had around Bye Bye Birdie, where it was very clear that a lot of the performers had come from the world of live theater and were just playing to the back of the room.
Right.
So, you know, the difference between the choices, I keep saying the acting choices you make, like they were making the choices, but what you do in silent film and what you do on stage and what you do for contemporary acting with dialogue, obviously all radically different.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously used to people who are doing subtler things because they can also talk.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting though, because they were clearly also saying dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing it and like trying to pick out things in my shitty German.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's one scene where she was like, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. And I almost started singing the song from Square One. 999, fantastic number 9. It's perfectly consistent. It works out every time.
It's like Singing in the Rain, where like whatever the dialogue was supposed to be in that scene, the actor could get away with just going, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And they would just, you know, put something more meaningful up on the intertitles because he was just doing the visual bit.
Right. But also there were a lot of times where people would be talking and there was no intertitle.
Yeah.
And that was so fucking frustrating.
Yeah. Like the way things were communicated in silent films, you know, you get the broad strokes in the intertitles, but you also like have to see what you can glean from just the movements and everything. And I was very interested in how this would affect you, who you are a very visual learner, and just the way you experience things. I mean, for those unfamiliar, you're a speed reader.
I certainly am.
And you are a very visual person. You know, we watch everything with the captions on. And so when you had no other options but to be visual in how you experience this film, I was interested to see how that would like affect one way or another your experience of sitting down and watching a film.
There were so many things that happened that were so hard for me. One of my, shall we say, negative traits, and people have commented on it a lot, is I tend to zoom in on flaws, visual flaws. I can look at a piece of paper and I'm like, there's a period missing there, or that one word is misspelled. Something was hinky with the makeup on the dude who was playing the young guy. Though I don't know if it was the way it was lit or the makeup or what it was, but like it just stopped short of his jawline at certain angles. And I was like, from that angle, he looks like he's 80 years old and this is really hard to take seriously. Like That was the thing. It was, because yes, visually, this film is like nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason I like to watch with the captions on is, I read quickly. So I can read quickly, and then I can sort of take the visual pulse of everything else that's going on screen once I know what the words are.
Mm-hmm.
It helps me really both understand and also get a whole look at the whole thing. So having that taken away from me, so complicated. So complicated.
That's very interesting.
Feelings,
man. Okay, not to take something that's obviously stressing you out a bit and treat it like I'm looking at a fascinating specimen under a microscope, but I kind of am, and that's really, as someone who does not experience the visual and text world in the same way that you do, this is an interesting way to learn this bit about you.
I love the fact that this podcast is enabling us to learn more about each other in unexpected ways.
So that was Heinrich George as Grot, Guardian of the Heart Machine. Erwin Biswanger as 11811, a worker, also known as Georgie.
I'm so excited. I have what I'm going to say about this character planned for when we get to that part in the plot.
Yes.
He was there. He had the same haircut that Paul Metzler had in Election.
Yeah,
he had floppy penis hair.
Everyone in this movie had sort of that early 20th century, like, floofy, top of the head hair.
With one exception.
Mm-hmm.
That dude who was basically like the pimp of the harem.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Who I'm assuming we're not going to get to in the cast list.
Well, I skipped over him already. Heinrich Gotho as Master of Ceremonies in Pleasure Gardens.
Right, that dude.
Yes.
Who had the most incredible comb over ever in the history of combs over. Where his head was basically like a daffodil, and they had just taken all the hair from the base of his head and pushed it forward and then curled up the ends. His head looked like a daffodil. Speaking of the visual takeaways from this movie.
Yeah. It was a thing. That was a hairdo, and a lot of people had it. And it's funny, like, when people started getting filthy and running around and getting wet and whatever, and just watching that particular hairstyle flop around like hundreds of times over as everyone on screen has it. And in the fight scenes, it's just the way it flops around is very distinctive.
Yeah.
That particular haircut. And this guy, of course, his character trait was that he looked like Frater, the main character. Also, an interesting thing about this version of the film is you can tell the bits that were the most recent additions to the film, the most recently recovered editions. And there's a whole text bit at the beginning of the before the movie that explains that when the frame gets smaller and there's more black border around it, that's because the recovered footage from Argentina was on 16 millimeter. It was basically a dupe of the movie, and it didn't catch the whole frame, but also it was much scratchier.
Right. The scenes where it looked like it was raining were the recovered footage.
Right. And by looking for which recovered footage, there was, as somebody who's seen this film a lot, it's very interesting to see what the decision was made to cut out that resulted in that footage being left behind for so long. So, like, the stuff that was scratchier is stuff that, like, someone somewhere made the deliberate decision to cut out of the movie.
And some of it was quick, and some of it was like whole scenes.
Right.
Was it jarring?
It wasn't jarring for me. I could, after the first once or twice, I could just look past it. But it was also, there was that experience for me that I told you after the film, which was, when you see a film you know well, but there are more scenes in it, and it's like getting more of a peek into the world. And as a fan of this film, like, I kind of knew, and I've read the novel as well, seen scripts, whatever. So it was known what was missing in those scenes. And in previous versions of the film, they would just, like, put the text up on the screen, this guy does this and that happens and so on and so on. But seeing the scenes, it's just a really fascinating experience. I think, like, imagine if, someone put St. Elmo's Fire in front of you, except there were more scenes in it.
That happened to me. Because my first experience of St. Elmo's Fire was Tuesday night at the movies on CBS.
Yes.
So it was edited.
Mm-hmm.
There were scenes missing.
Uh-huh.
And there were parts of scenes missing, and there were things that had been edited. The sound had been edited.
Yeah, and for those who haven't heard us talk about this movie before, it's one of Gila's favorites. And
absolutely.
So go on.
So I had this tape from Tuesday night at the movies with the commercials and everything. And
so the broadcast version.
The broadcast version, and I would watch it on a very, very regular basis. And then somehow it was accidentally taped over. Then my dad said, well, Gila, good news, bad news. The bad news is taped over St. Elmo's Fire. The good news is I found it on cable and I taped it for you. Whoa there, monkey. Everything was different.
Mm-hmm.
There was additional footage. There's a bit in the party scene where some people are doing coke. That was not on CBS.
Mm-hmm.
There were swear words. Those were not on CBS.
Mm-hmm.
Took me a long time to get adjusted. I did eventually. But it was a whole thing. And also, to a lesser extent, when we were watching the Empire Records Ultra Fan Remix version, the extra bullshit.
Yes.
No. Some of those scenes should have stayed cut.
Yeah. I had that experience with the movie Weird Science, which I had not seen until it was on broadcast television.
Mm-hmm.
I had a tape taped off of the broadcast version. And I could kind of tell like what was changed. I mean, you could tell when the voice changes, so they've dubbed over it with a sound alike or whatever. And when somebody's mouth is going, oh shit, and you hear, oh no.
What a knockabout of pure fun that was.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting example because in Ghostbusters, they actually filmed the original actors doing the scenes with and without swears and then just used one version or the other, depending on whether they needed the clean version or not. Whereas when they dub things over and then you get to hear really awkward dialogue made to fit the original lip flap as best they could. Like when they talk about how the guy's ex-girlfriend kicked him in the guts and called him a braggart in front of everybody. And that's not what they said in the actual original version of the film.
Vote your conscience, you chicken schlame. Ah!
Yeah, exactly. So
that's the American president, by the way, boys and girls.
So yes, the experience of knowing a movie well and then seeing it with more is there's got to be some kind of name for that.
Probably
and if there
something in German.
Yeah, probably. On that note, let's talk about Theodore Luce as Josaphat, Fredersen's assistant and Freder's friend.
Yeah. I felt bad, especially at the beginning when he got canned.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was willing to continue being part of it, the fact that he was willing to work with Freder, good man. The fact that he was willing to continue his relationship with Freder despite the fact that everything had kind of gone to shit with his dad. And I wonder, did they know each other before? Because, at the very beginning, he, was hugging him before he could get to his dad.
Yeah.
But was that just because he was there? Or because they knew each other? When you're a kid or a coddled adult who's treated like a kid, perhaps, the people who work in your parents' offices.
Yeah. I mean, he seemed to know Rotwang, who we'll get to. One thing about this actor that has always struck me is that visually, who he resembles. He looks to me a lot like an actor named Kurt Fuller, who you may know as Hardemeyer from Ghostbusters 2, the assistant to the mayor.
He's also the...
who I've just brought a picture up of.
Yeah.
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 He's got that
in
kind
Wayne's
of...
World also.
Yeah. He's got that look about him. And the fact that he's like the sort of lackey in this movie, that's a Kurt Fuller kind of role.
It really is. When is he not a lackey?
So he does well. One thing, and this applies a lot to Georgie as well, 11811, is that whole thread was one of the first things cut, I think. And so that was the missing footage, like the whole sidestep to Yoshiwara wasn't in the original. And so there was so much less of him in the versions of the film that I had seen before.
Of Josaphat or Georgie?
Both of them. Okay. Because like they had that whole side story, that whole thread.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to finally see more of them. This is an awesomely named individual, Fritz Rasp, as the Thin Man, Fredersen's spy. He looks like a guy named Fritz Rasp.
He does. Even without hearing his voice, that's a Fritz Rasp. Yeah.
And
with the hat and the... It's creepy.
Do you know who he reminded me of?
Lurch?
No, what the hell's the name of that British comedian who was the tall, creepy dude in Jojo Rabbit? And Stephen
Merchant.
Stephen Marchant. Yes.
Marchant.
Yeah, he looks like Stephen Marchant in Jojo Rabbit. Or, Stephen Marchant in Jojo Rabbit looks like him.
But also, Lurch.
But actually, it would make a lot of sense for Jojo Rabbit to take inspiration from this because he's, the creepy German dude. And I wonder if he did other things. Was a German film actor who appeared in more than 100 films between 1916 and 1976.
So I'm going to say yes.
Yes. And he appears to have stayed in Germany.
So probably a collaborator?
He was in an early German adaptation of Jane Eyre. I assume he played Jane.
Yeah. Your reader, I married him.
Rudolf Klein-Rogge as Rotwang, the inventor.
So when you told me that this character was the visual inspiration for Doc Brown...
At least a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, what a dick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really.
Yeah. The character was not a good man.
Oh my god, so unpleasant. Ugh, just really boilerplate mad scientist. And there was an intertitle that seemed to imply that he had been killed, and I was happy. I was glad. And then he showed up again, and I was pissed.
It's funny that you call him the boilerplate mad scientist because, of course, no one had done that shit before. So he is the boilerplate. Mad scientists look like him.
Right. Like I said, you can see how this movie has affected everything that came after it.
Even like his laboratory with all the bottles and the curly glass tubes and the sparkling electrical things and just everything's like throw these levers, do these switches, and stare like a maniac at the thing happening in front of you. Right.
And in the same way that, that part of, again, the visual inspiration for Doc Brown came from Rotwang or Rotwang or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
You can also see it in Rick.
Mm-hmm.
Like really, really intensely, except for Rick has a lab coat and Rotwang was just wearing black.
Rick from Rick and Morty. Yeah, Rick and Morty are like a deliberate knockoff of Doc and Marty, so that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. Except he burps less, I'm assuming. We couldn't hear Rotwang.
Yes.
Rotwang may have burped, I don't know.
Yeah, but what do you think of his performance?
Oh, I'm assuming the actor was not as creepy. Like, it's amazing how you can convey so much of that without talking. This guy was a crazy creep.
Mm-hmm.
And even without speaking a word, you knew he was a crazy creep.
Yes.
Well played. Guy who I'm sure is dead.
Oh yeah, he's dead, but he's also like he got kind of known for being a really good actor under makeup and prosthetics and wigs and stuff. Like he was basically a Lon Chaney type.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Gustav Freilich as Frater, Josh Fraterson's son. You described him early in the film when we were watching as the foppish idiot.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Foppish idiot man-child. That's it. Foppish idiot man-child with a floppy haircut. And at one point I was like, is he barefoot? He wasn't barefoot. He was just wearing really stupid shoes that looked like he was barefoot. His whole outfit. Fucking jodhpurs. I wanted to punch him in the damn face.
Yeah.
Repeatedly. And get him some real pants. However, even when he was undercover as 11811, he still looked stupid.
Yeah.
Just, like, I just wanted to punch him in the fucking face this entire movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he did get the big action movie glory when he was busy climbing shit.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's one part where they were climbing a rung ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Like a ladder, but a bunch of rungs stuck into the wall.
Yeah.
At one point, they stop and look down. And I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you look down when you're climbing that much on a ladder? It's fucking scary. I mean, I am afraid of heights, but still, it's scary.
Yeah. Not only did he have like the all white clothes and the white silky jodhpurs, And sometimes his necktie was actually tucked into his pants, which was especially special.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he wins the floppy stupid haircut contest in this movie. And that's not an easy contest to win in this movie.
No, everybody's got a floppy stupid haircut. Except for Daffodil Head.
Yeah.
Pimp Daddy Daffodil Head.
And the character is shit. But, you know, movies did broad strokes back then.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when you see him in the beginning and he's living the life of privilege and everything, and, like, there were women lining up to be the one who entertains him, and then he gets one look at the poor people and decides, like, this is his new cause. And this leads, of course, to him. We'll get to the plot, but, like, he basically doesn't earn anything he gets, plot-wise.
No.
But, like, this was an era in which basically all you had to do to win everything you wanted as a movie character was, like, be the hero. And the hero gets everything going their way.
Wait, all you had to do to get everything was to be rich and white and born into privilege?
Jawohl.
Isn't it amazing how the world has changed?
Yeah. So Gustav Fröhlich, clicking over to his Wikipedia for a while, during the Third Reich, Gustav Fröhlich remained one of the foremost male stars in German film. Between 1931 and 35, Fröhlich was married to Hungarian opera star and actress Gita Alpár, with whom he had a child. He was engaged to the actress Linda Bierova until she became involved with the Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Him showing up again. There's also an unconfirmed story that Fröhlich slapped Goebbels in a fit of jealous rage.
I mean, that's not as good as the story about John Lovitz punching out Andy Dick, but that's still pretty good.
Yeah, except he was okay with the Nazi thing. He just they were fighting over the girl apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, he stayed there. He died in Germany in the 60s, I think. So
what a schmuck.
Yeah,
and that's appropriate to say because German.
Yeah.
Jawohl, you betcha.
And Alfred Abel as Joe Friederson, the master of Metropolis.
He did Stiff very well.
Yeah, I think in regards to the general level of acting in this movie, he was the subtle one.
He really underplayed a lot.
He underplayed, and it totally worked for his character and where he was and who he was. And I think it made it effective near the end when he's losing his shit.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because there's one point where I said to you, is he laughing or crying right now?
Mm-hmm.
I honestly couldn't tell. And it did lend itself to that sense of his character losing his shit. Because I couldn't tell how he was reacting. It's fascinating. Yeah.
So, since we're going over to the actors' own pages, Abel was married to Elizabeth Seidel, with whom he had one daughter, Ursula. Ursula, like her father, also became a film actor. However, the Nazi regime in 1935 prohibited her from appearing in any further films after she failed to produce ancestry papers for her father to prove he was not of Jewish descent. After battling a long-time illness, Abel died on 12th of December, 1937, aged 58.
Wow.
And he was buried in Berlin. So, yeah, just his expressions and the close-up on his eyes as, like, his brows were like a straight line across his face. He reminds me a lot of, there's another famous silent film actor named Conrad Veidt who made the transition to sound pictures later. He was in Thief of Baghdad, things like that. He played the original screen Jafar. He was known for playing the intense guy, the evil guy. The original Joker from Batman was based on him visually. And this guy reminds me of him.
I think there's also a lot to be said for his subtlety as a facet of the character.
Mm-hmm.
This guy was in charge of everything. He didn't have to feel shit.
Right. Yeah. He
didn't have to.
He didn't have to. And he was also, like, you would expect the guy surrounded by underlings who was in charge of everything to act like that. You wouldn't run your empire, like, in broad gestures and stuff. You would be the very quiet, reserved, intense guy because a word from you could make or break somebody, as we see in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays that, I think, very well.
I would agree.
Out of everyone else, I think his acting would not be out of place in a modern film.
For sure.
Which is not something I think you could say of anyone else in this movie.
I agree.
All right, and that is the cast, pretty much, of Metropolis.
Well, okay.
The plot from the Wikipedia article for Metropolis 1927 film. In the future, in the million-acre city of Metropolis, wealthy industrialists and business magnates and their top employees reign from 50 to 1,000-story skyscrapers, while underground-dwelling workers toil to operate the great machines that power the city. Now, one thing I'm noticing off the bat about this plot section is people must have filled it in based on the novel, because they're going into a level of detail that the film really doesn't specifically go
Yeah, we
to.
never really find out, like, how tall the buildings are.
Yeah.
They're just tall.
Joe Fredersen is the city's master. His son Frater idles away his time at sports and in a pleasure garden, but is interrupted by the arrival of a young woman named Maria, who has brought a group of workers' children to witness the lifestyle of their rich brothers. Maria and the children are ushered away, but Frater, fascinated, goes to the lower levels to find her.
Okay, so this is something that I was curious about.
Yes.
The elevators are always running.
Mm-hmm.
It always kind of seemed to me that there would be some sort of elevator operator who was checking to see if you were authorized to go places, especially on the up elevators. Like, it seemed to me that if the society was that stratified, you wouldn't want people going from one to the other. But the elevator, the recurring motif of the elevators throughout the movie, I found fascinating.
Yeah.
Because at the very beginning, like, that's what you see. You see a troop of workers finishing a shift and getting on the elevators and going home. And those elevators have operators and doors. Later, you see elevators that don't, that are just running consistently and you can hop on and hop off.
Yeah.
As a person afraid of heights, I was terrified by so much of what happened in this movie. Like, you could just fall out of those elevators.
This is true.
Absolutely terrifying.
I think also it works to get across visually, and this is a silent movie, everything's got across visually. It gets across where people are in this big, this greater machine of the Metropolis. Like, people are just cogs going by on a conveyor belt, basically, to keep everything going, especially in the lower levels.
And you could tell also where someone belonged in the strata by what they were wearing. Right? Like, the undercity people, with the notable exception of Maria, were wearing dark gray, like charcoal gray, if not black. Right? And Frater was wearing white, and most of the people in the above lands were, like, the men were wearing suits. Frater was wearing white fop clothes.
Yes.
And the Pleasure Garden women were showgirls.
Yes.
There was no in between.
There wasn't.
But Maria was dressed in above colors.
That's interesting. Yeah, she had kind of a simple garment, but also more interesting than anything the workers were wearing.
But it was also light colored, which is not a thing in the underworld.
That's interesting. There are questions to be asked about who Maria actually is and where she comes from and how she ended up as this whole figurehead. On the machine levels, he witnesses the explosion of a huge machine that kills and injures numerous workers. Frater has a hallucination that the machine is a temple of Moloch and the workers are being fed to it.
Yeah. Are we to believe that Frater is, not all there?
You described him well as the foppish idiot. Also, like, him being the hero of a silent film, like, that's just how characterization was on screen. I think everything was in very broad strokes. It was very simple. Okay, this guy is obviously the hero. He's obviously the one that the audience is supposed to be identifying with. I don't know if an audience then would have been asking the questions like, what was Frater doing with himself before this one instant where he sees poor children and all of a sudden the scales are fallen from his eyes?
And was it the poor children that he saw, or was it Maria? Was it supposed to be like a Romeo and Juliet type of, I see you and I'm going to throw over everything I know for this love I believe that I have, which is really probably an infatuation.
That was the thing. You look at a woman and suddenly you're in love with her, and of course she's in love with you too. Because you're a man and it's 1927.
He's in love with Kim. Kim's in love with him.
They were all in love with Diane. They were doing it in Texas. When the hallucination ends and he sees the dead workers being carried away on stretchers, he hurries to tell his father about the accident. Fraterson asks his assistant, Josephat, why he learned of the explosion from his son and not from him.
Can we talk about the machines for a second?
Sure.
What do they do?
Excellent question.
Or are the machines just there to keep the under people busy?
I think the implication through the whole thing is that the machines that they're struggling to maintain and keep going in the underworld are the machines that are providing all the power and maybe goods and services, who knows, for the above world.
Okay. I'm sure we'll discuss this further.
Yes.
I don't know if I believe that, though.
Grot, foreman of the Heart Machine, brings Fredersen secret maps found on the dead workers. Fredersen again asks Josaphat why he did not learn of the maps from him, and fires him. After seeing his father's cold indifference toward the harsh conditions they face, Freder secretly rebels against him by deciding to help the workers. He enlists Josaphat's assistance and returns to the machine halls, where he trades places with a worker.
Right.
Prince and the Pauper.
But the machine that 11811 was working on literally was nothing. It was just like moving the sticks, which looked like hands of a clock, but weren't hands of a clock. You had to move the sticks to match the lights.
Yes.
Move the sticks to match the lights. Move the sticks to match the lights.
Indeed.
Accomplishing nothing.
Well, we don't know. Maybe it accomplished something. The machine is called the Heart Machine, and I think that's in dialogue in the film, too. And when the Heart Machine stops later in the film, we see like the Undercity's flooding and there's disaster and
But was that
and
part
everything.
of the Heart Machine?
It seems to be. It seems to be that like part of what it was doing was keeping the Undercities livable.
Because the Heart Machine, we saw the Heart Machine, but there was also like, what was that machine that exploded when he first got down there? That wasn't part of the Heart Machine. I
think it's all part of the Heart Machine.
Oh,
I think that the Heart Machine is implied to be this massive, like, just infrastructure-y thing. You know, when it stops at the end of the film, and of course, spoilers for a 93-year-old film. When it stops at the end of the film, like, the Undercity floods, but also the elevators everywhere stop, and the lights go out, and so it seems to be what's keeping everything going.
But the whole point is that you have to work as hard as you can for as long as you can to accomplish even a livable, and it's gross down there.
Yes.
But to allow, I don't like this society. I know you're not supposed to, but I don't.
Fair enough. Fredersen takes the maps to the inventor Rotwang to learn of their meaning. Rotwang had been in love with a woman named Hel, who left him to marry Fredersen and later died, giving birth to Freder. Rotwang shows Fredersen a robot he has built to, quote, resurrect Hel. The maps show a network of catacombs beneath Metropolis, and the two men go to investigate. They eavesdrop on a gathering of workers, including Freder. Maria addresses them, prophesying the arrival of a mediator who can bring the working and ruling classes together. Freder believes he could fill the role, and declares his love for Maria. This kind of skips over the whole thing where suddenly there's this whole story she's telling about the Tower of Babel. And how it was a great and noble idea to the people who planned it, and it was just a massive hassle for the people who actually had to build it, and that caused friction between the two classes.
Also, never the way I've heard the story of the Tower of Babel. Ever. Because the way I heard the story of the Tower of Babel was that everyone worked together to make it happen, and then God said, oh no, if everyone works together, they'll be more powerful than God. I have to figure out a way to stop this. And that's how all the different languages happen. That's the Tower of Babel story I heard.
Yeah.
I understand that silent film. But I would never accuse this movie of being subtle.
Right.
In no small part because if you're going to have an epigraph on your movie, maybe don't make it the fucking moral of the fable that you're trying to tell that then gets repeated as an intertitle like 3 different times. Like, you don't get to do that. That's not how it works.
It might have been back then, although it might have also been on the heavy-handed side of things.
Might.
Well, I don't know. Did we talk already about the reception of this film?
I think we did. Did we?
We might have touched on it a little. Basically, one of the big criticisms of it when it was released was that the story was basically ham-handed. Like, it was pretty, but they were clunking you over the head with the story. And it was also very simplistic and reductive. Yeah.
Very pretty, very reductive.
And if critics at the time were saying such things about this, and they were used to what actually was going on in silent film in general.
All the more so 93 years later.
Or as they called it back then, film.
Right.
This is perhaps not just a you're not used to silent film thing, but this is how the story is clunking you over the head.
I mean, I think it's a combination of two. A lot of feelings, man.
A lot of feelings.
I always have a lot of feelings, though. Have you noticed that?
I have. It's part of why I enjoy doing this project so much with you.
Modern Technology Watches, Gila's got feelings.
We need to put that on a t-shirt.
With that said.
Fredersen orders Rotwang to give Maria's likeness to the robot so that it can ruin her reputation among the workers to prevent any rebellion. Fredersen is unaware that Rotwang plans to use the robot to kill Frater and take over Metropolis. Rotwang kidnaps Maria, transfers her likeness to the robot, and sends her to Fredersen, her being the robot.
Right. The way that they did that was actually very, very cool.
It was.
The effects in that moment were fantastic.
The effects and all the conceits they used, which even the ones that now seem hacky and cliche because every other movie with a mad scientist uses them, again, this is where it started. Lang and everyone had to put this together, make this happen in a way that had never really been seen before on film.
And it's weird to see like the birth of all these different cliches, which weren't cliches then.
Yes.
But seeing it backwards, it's fascinating. But again, I question how it is that he was giving her likeness to the robot. She wasn't wearing makeup, but the robot totally was.
Well, the men were wearing makeup too, because you had to in silent films in order to make you be able to see their lips.
The amount of eyeliner on Robot Maria when Person Maria wasn't wearing any.
Yes.
That just kind of surprised me.
That's also the visual cue for the audience.
Absolutely.
Especially later when both of them are running around. That's so you, the viewer, can tell which one is which.
Yes, or as I call them, Maria and Marie AndroidNet.
Marie AndroidNet. Well, actually, the word android refers to specifically a male human-shaped robot, because android comes from andros, which means man, and a female-looking robot would be a gynoid, but nobody uses that word because it's kind of gross. And so, yeah, she's an android.
Marie AndroidNet.
Yes. Marie AndroidNet.
And one of my favorite things were all the different intertitles where Frater was yelling Maria. And just the way that they would the different effects that they would use on the intertitles were fabulous.
It was pretty great. And
Maria dash. Maria dash dash.
Well, some of these were also cues that you would see in intertitles, like dash dash exclamation point is like, you know what that means. It's like Maria, and you're shouting, but it's trailing off. And it's like when we watch Doctor Who with the captions on, and the captions have been put together by people used to writing for a UK audience. And when someone is being sarcastic, they then punctuate that in the captions with an exclamation point that's in parentheses, which is widely known as the sarcasm punctuation when you're reading captions. But it's not so common over here. And so
I do find it helpful.
It is helpful.
Because sometimes I miss the sarcasm.
Yeah. But it's another example of how these things sort of evolve their own conventions for the people reading them.
Absolutely.
And also ways in which you can get things like vocal intonation into text.
But there are also ones where they did word art and it was wavy or moving or vocal media. I can't.
Yeah. The first one, when the machine killing everyone and has the hallucination that it's Moloch, the demon, and the way he shouts Moloch, and it's all animated together. And I think that's the first one that happens in the movie. And it kind of takes you unawares if you're not expecting it.
I was taken unawares.
Yeah.
For I had no expectations going in.
Yes. If we watch some more silent films, like don't expect, Chaplin or Harold Lloyd to have wavy animated exclamations.
Chaplin and Harold Lloyd are known for a lot of different things.
Yes.
People tend not to talk about it as groundbreaking cinema filmmaking in the same way. The groundbreaking stuff with Chaplin was not this.
That's true.
The acting.
But also it's nowadays no one would accuse I don't know, The Hangover of being art films.
No. No. And, I think Fritz Lang was I'm going to make a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And Charlie Chaplin was I'm going to make a movie.
And Charlie Chaplin was let's get this thing filmed and done in a week so we can get on to the next one. And Fritz Lang's I'm going to film for 17 months and spend all the Deutschmarks. Or I guess they were Reichsmarks at the time.
Probably.
Anyway.
Just marks.
Marks. Frater finds the two embracing and, believing it is the real Maria, falls into a prolonged delirium. Intercut with his hallucinations, the false Maria unleashes chaos throughout Metropolis, driving men to murder and stirring dissent among the workers.
When is the Seven Deadly Sins ballet?
That's around now.
What the fuck was that?
That was her going to Yoshiwara, Metropolis, Vegas, and basically being the Nomi Malone showgirl, going, she starts out as the virginal, Maria, and ends up doing these dances in these showgirl, what might be generously termed clothes. And you see the audience just leering at her and getting more and more animalistic and like starting to fight with each other because of how they're all lusting over hair. And that's I don't know, is that an interesting message to send?
It is. I mean, it was just a really long sequence for it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, again, the limitations of silent film.
Mm-hmm.
But, was that the only way to express that, yeah, okay, they all think she's hot and they're willing to follow her anywhere no matter what she says? Like, we could have done that in probably half the time.
Maybe.
Notes, Fritz Lang. Notes.
Well, you were a little late to give Fritz Lang notes.
God damn it.
But even there, we had examples of more like weird ass, surreal, trippy effects that he was using. Like she's flapping around on stage, dancing and jiggling, and then you see like just this wall of eyes leering at her, and everything's put together, and it's all blobby, and it gets less and less human looking. And this is the bit where I get all expressionist film dork about it, and go, I really dig how this movie presented what was going on. And in ways that I don't think anyone had done before.
Right, but then the 7 Deadly Sins. Like, one of the intertitles was, I'd commit all 7 deadly sins for her. And then smash cut to the 7 deadly sins coming out of, like, their niches in the wall. And
Yes. Yes, and then Death is in the middle of all of them.
Death is, like, waving his scythe like a hockey stick.
Yeah, and that's Fredersen's hallucination, his delirium dream, just
Frater.
from the shock of...
Little Frater.
Oh, Little Frater. Yeah. It's so confusing how Fredersen is the father and Frater is the kid.
Well, I think I get it. Fredersen named his son after his father.
Maybe.
If Fredersen is in fact Frater's son, then yeah. Johann Fredersen named his son after his father.
Well then. I hadn't thought of that. I wonder if that's in the novel. I haven't read it in a long time. But also this is like just a huge prolonged like head trip this kid is having, based on the fact that he saw the fake Maria hugging his father.
Right.
It is another way in which, like, a silent film like this had to be really over the top and broad strokey with what people were going through.
So true.
Also, it's interesting seeing what they were allowed to film Maria doing back before we had things like the Hays Code in this country and
the Nazis.
Yeah, the Nazis over there. But, like, film was a new thing, and I don't think people had put as much thought into, can you show the boobies flapping around?
Right, I was wondering that, like, in the Pleasure Garden section, which also, watching this as we did so soon after we had watched The Producers.
Yes.
Yeah, there were definitely some visual cues taken for the Showgirls in Springtime for Hitler from the women in the Pleasure Garden.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
interesting.
Speaking of the Pleasure Garden, can we just take another second to talk about the Pleasure Garden pimp and his daffodil hair?
The Pleasure Garden pimp and his daffodil hair,
The
yes.
Pleasure Garden pimp and his daffodil hair, which I know we discussed at length during the cast section, but wow. Just wow. Did you ever, or did your sisters ever, more to the point, have any toys from Rose Petal Place? Were you familiar with that at all?
It does not ring a bell.
Okay, my grandmother had a couple of like Rose Petal Place storybooks for me at her house.
All right.
And Rose Petal Place was convoluted. It came sort of on the heels of like Strawberry Shortcake, and it was like, we're going to do something that is not food related. And basically there was a girl who was sick, and she cried, and an enchanted tear fell on a rose, and then like the rose became a person. And apparently this little girl cried a lot because Rose Petal had all kinds of friends. There was Daffodil and Violet, and there was like a slug that was it was weird, man. It was weird. It was like someone saw Strawberry Shortcake and said, I'm going to drop acid and come up with another concept.
Okay.
And so they did. So there was Daffodil, who had like the boutique where they all got their clothes.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm totally getting off track here, but that was what the hair reminded me of. Just honestly, the whole Pleasure Palace garden thing.
So their hair in this thing was made out of flowers?
They were flowers.
Oh, they were flowers.
They were flowers. So Daffodil, like, looked like a fucking daffodil. And I had a doll of, I think, Violet, because Violet was the dancer. And I took dance when I was little. All the dolls smelled vaguely like flowers.
Oh, okay.
Like, I was not a big doll kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was a stuffed animal kid. I was not a doll kid. But I had this doll, and yep, she smelled like flowers, and she had blue hair, and they all had a little crystal teardrop on them because this little child had cried magical tears onto them, and thus they all came to life.
That's kind of an irresponsible use of life-giving child tears. But
We can link to Rose Petal Place in the show notes, because I cannot be alone with this.
It does make sense, because Strawberry Shortcake's whole thing was that the dolls smelled like the fruit or whatever that they were named after.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I could see Rose Petal Place being created as an early panic rejoinder about childhood obesity. As in, let's get away from things that are edible, let's do flowers.
What about, like, child pregnancy now? Because this little girl is going around creating life all over the place, just willy-nilly. And
well, all life is sacred.
Did she suffer any consequences, or at least have to raise them?
No, I mean, they were adults. They were adults. They had businesses and projects, and it was fucked up, man.
Wow. Visions of some cartoon little girl crying with diaphragms on her eyes.
Oh,
anyway.
jeez.
I may have to scare this up later and see if it's out there to see, because now I'm intrigued. Anyway. Frida recovers and returns to the catacombs. Finding the false Maria urging the workers to rise up and destroy the machines, Frida accuses her of not being the real Maria. The workers follow the false Maria from their city to the machine rooms, leaving their children behind. This glosses over the bit where 11811 is the one worker in this crowd of workers being stirred into a froth by a fake Maria, who listens to him and gets killed for his troubles.
Mm-hmm.
This summary doesn't go into it, but there was the whole lost side plot in the movie about the worker 11811 that Frater had switched places with and given him his own clothes and told him, meet me at Josephat's apartment and we'll figure out our next move. He gets into Frater's car with the chauffeur, or a car. I don't know.
He gets into a car. He gets into a driven car.
He gets into a chauffeured car and starts going to the address that Frater gave him, but then realizes that he's got a pocket full of Frater's money. And
so basically he says, blue skies, Barthy burgers, girls.
Yes. and
I've been waiting a week to say that.
Nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you.
And decides to go to Yoshiwara instead. That also introduces the viewer to Yoshiwara, and what happens there, it's all dancing and casinos and smooching and partying, basically.
Yeah.
So it's the high-class...
Pleasure Emporium.
Pleasure Emporium, yeah. Yeah, he decides to go play with that until he gets back to a car after a night of that and gets found by the Thin Man, who's Fraterson's spy, who he sends after his son after he suspects his son might be having untoward thoughts.
Right. I want to know what my son is doing at every moment, says the Thin Man.
And so pretty much that whole plot, like in the edited versions of the film, pretty much 11811 disappears after he switches clothes with Frater and is never spoken of again because he was cut out of the film, because his whole side plot with Yoshiwara and everything was cut out. I think mainly because a lot of the stuff they showed in Yoshiwara, like censors of the time, would have not wanted to keep in the film.
Very, very true. But, they're supposed to rendezvous back at Josephat's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets back there and says, okay, where's Georgie? For that is the kid's name.
Yes.
And Josephat says, Georgie? I have not seen Georgie.
Yes.
Because he, blue skies, Barthy burgers, girls.
Exactly. So Georgie's been on this, hedonism bender. Yes, exactly.
Well, Frater's been in the underneath world.
Yes.
Moving the hands on the clock machine. And finding one of the maps, which is where he found Maria.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
For whom he had been looking. And that's when he fell to his knees and said, I've been looking for you. And then they hugged. Yes.
And they had one of those chaste, very tightly closed mouth kisses that you were allowed to have in a movie back then.
Yes.
Irrespective of the fact that the actress would be flapping her boobs around later on. Social mores, weird things.
Robot boobs.
Robot boobs. The workers follow the false Maria from their city to the machine rooms, leaving their children behind. They destroy the heart machine, which causes the workers' city below to flood. Now, this whole scene, it should be noted, also this was no union shop. Fritz Lang apparently got like hundreds of kids from the poor neighborhoods to come and be in his movie, and put them in his movie and basically dunked them in freezing cold water and threw them around a bit and shot at them with high pressure hoses. So the terrified crowds of children in this film are played by terrified crowds of children.
So you've got the terrified crowds of children in the encroaching floodwaters. 3 adults are trying to... Maria's clanging the big gong, and then Frater and Josephat show up, and they're trying to rescue all these children. Let me tell you where my mind went.
Okay.
There was an orphanage during World War II. It was run by a doctor called Janusz Korczak. And then all of them were deported and killed.
Yes.
And he went with them. And he took these children whom he had protected, who trusted him, and said, we're going somewhere beautiful. And they all went together, and they all died. And that was where my mind went during this whole segment.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's very hard to unpack this from everything that I've learned and that I know about Germany in the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah.
And is that the baggage of growing up an American Jewish person in the second half of the 20th century? Probably. Did that keep me from getting as deeply into this movie as perhaps I might have otherwise? Maybe. But knowing what was coming so soon after.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was really hard.
I hear you.
But yes, I spent this whole segment thinking about Korczak.
Legit. On the one hand, as a viewer, I try and keep in mind this is before any of that happened. You know, Lang's working with a clean slate pretty much. I mean, he still remembers the First World War.
Well, at the time, the World War.
Yeah, the Great War.
We didn't know the sequel was coming.
For how great it was, yes. Unnecessary sequels, I ask you. It's hard to uncouple from what happens next. And bearing in mind that Lang was chased out by the Nazis or fled the Nazis, and so did Brigitte Helm, who was playing Maria and fake Maria, and a bunch of the other ones just hung out. They were all right. Thea von Harbo was fine. It cannot be removed from that context by any thinking, feeling person completely.
And the movie was made in Germany. Is Metropolis supposed to be in Germany? I don't know.
Yeah, one would assume. I mean, I think if I'm remembering the novel correctly, and I might not be because it's been maybe 15, 20 years since I've read it. I think it's just like, it's a big city that exists. Like it's just this place. But, you know, being created by Germans and for a German audience, I think the easy assumption is that, yes, this is Germany.
Seeing all these Germans or German analogs being whipped into a salivating, rioting frenzy rather quickly.
Yes.
By someone who just said, kill, destroy. And they did. And someone who is specifically saying, let's kill and destroy the source of all our problems. Yeah. And it wasn't long. It really wasn't long before Hitler came to power. It really wasn't. And again, part of it is the gift of hindsight, but also just yeesh. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. They destroy the heart machine, which causes the workers' city below to flood. The real Maria, having escaped from Rotwang's house, rescues the children with Frater's and Josephat's help. I didn't think real Maria was dead, by the way, because when they showed, after they had transferred her likeness onto the robot, her head did that thing where it just kind of like plopped to the side very gently. Yeah. Which normally means death in these sort of situations. Yeah, they didn't spell out that she was dead, but they didn't spell out that she wasn't. Correct. And it was easy to, like, this movie does that a couple of times. Characters you figure are dead, like, just pop up again. Right, like when, I thought Rotwang was dead. He wasn't dead. Nope. Sorry, spoilers. He wasn't dead. Again, you know, I generally have spoiler warnings active for these things. It's part of our format that we spoil the entire movie. But this movie came out in 1927. Yeah, there are statutes of limitations to these things. I would think. We just haven't gotten to that part of the movie yet.
Grot berates the celebrating workers for abandoning their children in the flooding city. Grot being Beard Guy.
Beard Guy.
There's that whole scene where he's trying to keep the machines going and safe while everyone's rioting, and then they all center in on him, and he's like trying to be the lone voice of sanity, going, "No, you fools!" And they destroy the machines anyway. And then he tells them, "You idiots! You've just killed all your children."
I did sort of get the sense they beat the shit out of him too, though.
It does seem like it, though. He's the biggest guy around.
Right, but I did at one point think he had been killed because there was a crumpled heap of something. A crumpled heap of something that was the same color as the clothes all the workers were wearing, and I was like, oh, They beat him to death. They didn't.
The silent movie acting particularly grabs me after he tells them, and these are the workers with their wives somehow who have abandoned their children, but the workers are all men, and their wives are, dressed in simple garments, and their wives join them going on the merry tear around smashing the heart machine. And then when Grot tells them, where are your children? You've just killed all your children. And the women, especially in the crowd, are doing that huge, lamenting, sort of acting. Mm-hmm. And,
big eyes, big mouth.
Yeah. Big eyes, big mouth, flopping and contorting around in anguish.
Like fish.
Yes. Believing their children to be dead, the hysterical workers capture the false Maria and burn her at the stake, which is interesting also because it's then Grot who whips them up into a new froth going, that witch, she's the cause of all of this. Go find this woman that you are following and let's burn her at the stake, not knowing that she's a bot.
Right. My other question was, where do his loyalties lie?
Yeah, because he's also the one who in the beginning brings the notes found on the dead workers to Fredersen.
Right.
So he's dropping a dime on his workers for, going off and doing their own thing and fomenting a little disaffectation. So he's obviously in the beginning loyal to Fredersen. And then he's kind of, I guess you could say he's loyal to the machines when they're trying to smash everything up. And he's just like, no, don't smash the machines. And they smash the machines. And after that, you've all killed your children. Let's go find this witch and kill her. So he's then like, I guess on the same side as them, or they transfer their easily yoinked away loyalties to him now because he's just shown them that they've been a bunch of idiots.
Exactly. Like, is the upshot your loyalties lie anywhere? And does he have kids?
Yeah.
And also, did he ever say, I am Grot?
He did not ever say, I am Grot. At least not in any of the intertitles. It might have been part of the implied conversation where he went, I am Grot.
I am Grot.
Show me middle-aged woman in a Halloween costume. Bitch, I'm Groot.
Whew, yes, okay.
So it's shown to be terrible that they were just whipped up into this froth that apparently killed all their children, but then they're whipped up into a froth to just follow up by killing a woman. Mm-hmm. Because they're a bunch of gauzy freaks who will be led around by anything.
So is Fritz Lang trying to warn his countrymen not to let themselves be whipped up into a frenzy by any Tom, Dick, or Maria who comes around?
Interesting question. Yes, and the hysterical workers capture the false Maria and burn her at the stake, which Brigitte Helm's acting as she's like laughing and they're tying her to the stake and she's just having a time of it. And up to the point where they morph her back into the bot. I always found that, even seeing this as a kid, I always found that pretty haunting. How she was laughing it up as they were murdering her.
Yep. So are we to believe that like her human exoskeleton sort of melted away?
They didn't quite go into like Terminator level details of like she's a human face over an exoskeleton, or like did the bot actually change into like human features and just it changed back when it got burned? Or
we don't have any of those answers.
Yeah, this isn't that level of sci-fi.
I need answers. I need to understand how these things work. When were we talking about? Oh, it was an Adventure in Time and Space. Space and time.
Yes.
God damn it. But we did the Doctor Who movie.
Yes.
Yeah. I just need the parameters of the universe to understand how the shit works.
Well, the parameters of Metropolis are that they killed the bot.
Kill the robot. Kill the robot.
Which apparently also, because this was before we had many safety measures in place for these sorts of things, apparently Brigitte Helms' clothes caught actual fire because they had the fire too close to her while filming. She did not get real life fried. It was just a bit unpleasant.
Well, I mean, I'm glad she didn't get real life fried. But may I say, for the denizens of what is a sparse, mostly concrete underworld, good job on finding shit for a massive bonfire fire type situation very quickly.
This is true. Well, it's hard to tell in black and white what was made out of wood that we were looking at.
You make a good point.
A horrified freighter watches, not understanding the deception until the fire reveals her to be a robot. Rotwang is delusional, seeing the real Maria as his lost hell, and chases her to the roof of the cathedral, pursued by Freighter. The two men fight as Freighterson and the workers watch from the street. Rotwang falls to his death. Freighter fulfills his role as mediator by linking the hands of Freighterson and Grot to bring them together.
Okay, hold on. Wait, backing up.
Yeah.
Who told Freighterson that Freighter had died?
No one told him Freighter had died, I don't think. I think just the Thin Man, the spy, had told him, don't you know your son's with the workers?
Right, but this was after the Undercity had flooded.
Right. And part of this whole thing that the summary did not point out was that this part of his whole plan was to let the workers destroy the machine, let them flood their own Undercity, and let them suffer the consequences. So that plan was in motion when he learned that his son was with the workers, and then you see him realizing what the hell he's just done.
I couldn't tell if he was laughing or crying.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of it was, I didn't think he had a lot of respect for his son. I really didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me thought that he thought, oh, well, he's down there. Okay, several problems solved all at once. I said, is he laughing or crying?
I think it was made clear that like he cared about his son. He just wanted to maintain control of him. And so like in the beginning, he sends the spy after him so he can keep abreast of his movements and so on. But like he thinks he's protecting his son from getting into that kind of tomfoolery. And so later when he realizes he's not only condemning the lives of a bunch of his working class, but also his son among them, then he starts feeling it. And I think Alfred Abel, or Abel, however you would pronounce that, who played Freighterson, like he's got that like serious business looking face and that kind of deadpan acting that actually gets a lot across. It's not just like a weak deadpan. It's a useful one. But then when the facade cracks and he starts showing the emotion of realizing that he's just killed his own son, I think that's some acting. I dug it.
It also doesn't mention what happened when Maria, Freighter, and Josephat were trying to get all the children up.
Right.
Which was harrowing.
Mm-hmm.
Utterly harrowing. Yeah,
as the city's flooding and Freighterson, Josephat, and Maria are trying to corral all these kids and get them to climb up these, rung ladders up to higher levels of the city.
So they're all in the staircase, and then they get to the top of the stairs, and they're trying to get into the air shaft, but there's a gate.
Yeah.
So you just got children crammed together on this staircase, reaching at each other.
Yeah.
And then Freighter and Josephat are like climbing the supports to try to get up. It's
yeah.
It's functionally an action sequence.
It is.
But it was also just all the children were just crammed together. And that was terrifying.
Yeah, every so often like the main characters would be each carrying a child.
Or two,
and the rest of the children are just in chaos around them.
And the water is like encroaching on them and
these are not CGI children. These are not adult stunt performers dressed as children. These are actual kids that the movie is flinging around.
Or just pouring water on.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness.
And so you watch it and it's a harrowing action sequence, but it's also like, oh my God, how close did this get to like Vic Morrow and John Landis here? Like the actual physical risk that this movie put a bunch of children to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. when they've rescued the children, they take them to the City of the Suns, which are the pleasure gardens. So the kids get to play around there and be taken care of by the people there on Frater's orders before Frater goes back down. And it's then I think it's Josephat, who tells the crowd of rioting workers that Frater saved your children. And so they know that their kids have not all been deaded by their own foolishness.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're watching the hero and the villain fight and so on.
Yeah, just watching this fight on the roof of the church.
Mm-hmm. The roof of the cathedral, which I think that's the largest chunk of what the complete version is still missing, is a scene in the cathedral where Frater talks to a monk and has some more biblical references thrown at him.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's at the top of this cathedral that the big fight at the end happens. He beats Rotwang, and they come back down, and it's on the steps of this cathedral at the big ornate entrance to it that Maria finally gets Frater to be the mediator between Grot, the hands, and his father, the mind, because the heart must be the mediator between the hands and the mind.
Yes, and had not already been A, the epigraph, B, a couple of lines of dialogue or intertexts, well, my goodness, the heart has to be the mediator between the head and the hands. Okay. Also, just in the scene where Rotwang has completely lost his mind, not that he really had it to begin with, but it's really gone, and he's advancing on Maria. They're fighting all over the cathedral, and he's chasing her, and all of a sudden, somehow she winds up on the bell rope.
Yes.
And just swinging around.
Yeah, she leaps into the shaft with the rope on the bell and like grabs onto the bell, and that's how I think Frater knows where she is.
Possibly.
Because they hear the bell ringing. But yeah, she's this body just, swinging up and down on the rope as it rings the bell.
And again, you knew she was actually doing it because 1927.
Yeah. There are pictures out there too. Like there's one that used to be my computer background for ages, which is Brigitte Helm in the robot suit with the head off, and someone is giving her a drink, and she does not look comfortable at all.
Understandably so.
Suffering for the art.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Metropolis.
That's Metropolis.
So.
Woo doggies.
So, when it comes down to it, what do you think?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be lining up to watch it again anytime soon. And I'm not just saying that because of the experience of watching a silent movie.
Mm-hmm.
However, Wowzers.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I know I've said it before, but I will say it again. Seeing so many of the cinematic antecedents of this movie all in the same place. Amazing. So unsubtle. So dramatically unsubtle. And again, not just in a silent movie kind of a way, but also just in a really bad storytelling kind of a way. The set pieces like the Seven Deadly Sins ballet. What?
Yeah.
What? I see how it has earned its place in cinematic history. And, again, looking at it, and it's easy to see what has come from it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it one of my favorites? No. Is it something I will ever want to see again? I don't know. Am I glad to have seen it? Yes. Do I appreciate your having shown it to me? Absolutely. Especially because I know how much it means to you.
Well, as I believe I said earlier, it means a lot to me as a film and as the milestone it is. And like Blade Runner, it's a feast for the damn eyes. Again, you could watch most of this movie, ignore the story, and just look at the shit going on in the background and have this whole experience of that world. I think it's an amazing bit of production design since before production design was really a thing people gave a lot of thought to. Mm-hmm. I don't think the story is anything earth-shattering. I think it's a very simple fable sort of thing, but I think it's well realized. And I do go back and watch this now and again. But I will tell you, and this will probably infuriate fans of this film who may be listening, the version I watch is not often this one, or at least the plain version, because when this movie was in the public domain, it's not anymore because of fuckery, but for a while it was, and it got adapted into all sorts of other things. Chunks of it, especially the Maria sequence, were used to make the video for Queen's Radio Gaga. Like, it was used in a ton of commercials. There is a version, brief mention was made of, by Giorgio Moroder.
Right.
Giorgio Moroder. who took Metropolis with an eye toward restoring it, but then he realized this is in the public domain. I could do something more creative with this, and made the more rotor version of Metropolis, which was, he took all the footage available at the time, which was basically the 90-minute version, and instead of intertitles, he changed all the dialogue to subtitles, which happened during the stuff moving around on screen. But also, he colored the scenes, not as in colorization, but as in every scene had a complete tint to it. So, like, one scene would be all blue or all purple or all red, depending on what was going on, to just add to the mood of the piece. And the most striking thing was that he basically had pop music and electronic music going through the whole thing, turning it into basically a long music video for a bunch of artists of the time that he was friendly with. Freddie Mercury is in there, Pat Benatar, Bonnie Tyler, Adam Ant, and just like the movie becomes scored by their songs. And it is a brain scrambler. And as you might imagine, like the silent movie fans and the film purists and everything look at that version and clench up really tightly, because they're like, how dare you, try and screw with this masterpiece. But it has its fans, and I'm one of them. And that is the only way in which I might show you this movie again someday.
That sounds interesting.
It's a spectacle in its own right. And, however you feel about remixing and such things, I think it's worth checking out.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
It sounds very up your street in so many ways. It is.
It's Metropolis plus synth pop, and if you know of my deep abiding love for a good chunk of synth pop, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
That it was.
Yeah, I am happy to have watched this with you.
I'm happy to have watched it with you. Thank you. If you have feelings about Metropolis, about silent movies in general, about anything we've said in the last however long we've been talking, because I feel like it's been a long time, in this episode or any previous episode, we would love to hear from you. You can find us on Twitter at mtpodcastnet.
Yes.
You can find us online at modern.technology. You can write to us using the email address watches@modern.technology. Or, if you're really feeling sporting, you can call us on the telephone.
The telephone?
The telephone.
You can use your telephone to call us and leave us a voicemail. You can ask questions, leave comments, and you can leave them in a voicemail, which we may play on a future installment of this program. And you can do that at United States telephone number 1-929-399-8414. Or you could go to modern.technology/contact on the web. From there, you can email us or get that phone number to call us.
So, thank you for joining us as we speed toward the end of Season 2 of Modern Technology Watches.
Yep, just a couple left.
Just a couple left. I think I'm going to bring us firmly back into the 20th century next time out.
Ooh, no spoilers, but I'm looking forward to whatever you decide to show me. So, for Modern Technology Watches, this has been Rob Vincent.
And Gila Drazen.
And we will see you in the future.
Someday. Theoretically, we'll see you at the movies.
You've been listening to episode 211 of Modern Technology Watches with Gila Drazen and Rob Vincent. Go to modern.technology on the web for more info on this show, our other work, and our social mediator presence. Our music is The Promise by Torley Wong, released Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0. Find more from Torley at torley.com. Thank you, Torley. Content from wikipedia.org is used under Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0. This podcast is released under Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 and is a production of Joyful Firefly, LLC. Send us email at watches@modern.technology. And if you like us, tell someone. And so it was interesting to finally see more of them. I can hear that when you do that, so...
I'm sorry, it's done now. It's
okay. Earrings, ladies and gentlemen, have joined the podcast.
I'm wearing a very cute pair of Huggies that have rhinestones on them, and they're adorable.
Let's point out that Huggies are apparently earrings, and you're not, in fact, wearing a baby's diaper.
I'm not wearing a baby's diaper. There's a style of hoop earring that hugs the earlobe, and they're known colloquially as Huggies.
You see what the Huggies will get you.
Yes, Gregory Hines, I see what the Huggies will get me.